Welcome back. I've got Angela Frank on the line. Angela, how are you?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks so much for having me on.
Really looking forward to this conversation, especially when we talk about marketing, which is something that's pretty critical for all entrepreneurs and small business owners to get their heads wrapped around. Because if you don't do that right, well, you're not going to have much of a business. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into this conversation.
Yeah, so I'm a fractional CMO. So companies bring me in to run, build, and lead their marketing teams. And so that involves a lot of leadership and marketing knowledge. So you mentioned marketing is so important. And this is so fun because what I do combines marketing and leadership, which I love both. So it's great.
Yeah, I love the fractional roles because it basically, when it's done right, and I've seen it not done right, but usually when you bring in a fractional CFO or CEO or COO or chief marketing officer, you get to basically focus pretty much on what you're there to do, and you don't necessarily get roped in too much into the nuances of the organization, although you need to be aware of it and be a part of it. But they realize, okay, we just have you for this period of time or this many days. So when you're here, we want you to be able to work on why you're here. And part of me goes, I think everybody should be fractional because in that way we cut out all the noise and we get right to the work. And we've seen that in different industries, especially like over in the UK, for example, when they started rolling out in many cases the 4-day work week, and they didn't extend the hours. So it wasn't like 10-hour days. It was like, no, we just eliminated 8 hours from our work week. And what we found in a lot of the studies is it forced a lot of organizations to get focused on what's important. And obviously, in a marketing situation, it's like, okay, we need to know as a company who we are, what are we trying to market, what's our product or service, why are we better than the others, why would you want to work with us, and really get focused on that and not get bogged down into the day-to-day stuff that we see a lot of people struggling with. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that you really highlighted two key benefits of highlighting fractional help. One is that there's no baggage with that role, right? You're coming in as the expert advisor, and somebody's hired you for a limited number, like a limited time. And so when you recommend something, you're recommending it because you know it's going to work for the client, and there's no huge backstory or baggage or anything involved that maybe an internal hire would have had to deal with, for the past few years. And I don't mean this negatively, like my business has baggage as well. Everybody has so much going on. But hiring this advisor, all of that stripped away, and they can give you the best advice to move forward. The other thing you mentioned is it is a limited time. So the benefit of hiring fractional leadership is you're hiring somebody, they're coming in, they're doing the most high leverage work that somebody in that position could do. And then the engagement changes. Either then they're as an advisor and you have them less often, or you hire them again later on, but you're able to get the work done that needs to be done in your business without the expensive overhead of hiring somebody in that role full time, right? So chief marketing officer, their salary is, $200,000 plus currently in the United States. That's a heavy investment for somebody to make, really at any stage of business. And so when you don't have the need for somebody to really be diving in and working on the area of business that you're hiring for full time, this is the best way for you to get that high level strategic support without having to make that huge commitment.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And also, too, it's a bit, although it's similar, but it's a little bit different than just bringing in a consulting firm, for example, where, like, okay, yeah, I'm working on this project, I'm working on this other one. Usually, if you have a fractional, in all likelihood, you've got pretty much all of their attention. You might have another client that pick up a day of week of work or something like that, possibly depending on what you're doing. Uh, but again, it cuts out all the noise. You don't have to worry about the benefits. It's specific. It's clearly laid out what they need to be done. You're working with them in an advisory type of role, and I've seen this dynamic before where in organizations, even if you're in the C-suite, there may be some situations where you're not necessarily comfortable or the platform isn't there for you to share your guidance and your suggestions and ideas as freely as you could if you were, or versus if you were an employee there and you're like, I don't want to rock the boat. Oh, this might upset them and all that. When you're a fractional, at least, with most of the fractional executives that I've worked with, they're like, I don't care. They need to hear what they need to hear. I'm going to tell them this. This is what I'm seeing. This is what it is. And it might be a little harsh for the people to hear, but if you don't warn them, especially it's like that campaign's not going to work because XYZ. If you're an employee, you're like, I like my job, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to kind of shrink down here and not say anything. And that doesn't do the company any favors. Okay, makes everybody quote unquote feel better, but it doesn't address what needs to be addressed. And I think that again, that's where there's a lot of strength in leveraging someone in a fractional role because again, like you said, they get to the pinpoint what they're there for, and they don't necessarily get roped into the other arenas within the organization.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the focus that somebody in a fractional position provides to your company is so important. And exactly like you said, Michael, somebody who, depends on you for a salary might not feel comfortable speaking up and saying, I actually disagree with that statement because I think it's bringing us in a direction that's not beneficial. A lot of my job as an advisor and a fractional CMO is having those conversations. I understand that you really think that this is the channel for you, but when we look at your data, we see that it's not bringing you business. So moving forward, we don't want to be marketing there. It's a waste of time and resources. Where we should be focusing more is this area over here where you're actually getting business from your marketing. And over time, if you want to bring that channel back in, we can discuss when that makes sense given the context of your strategy.
Yeah, we see that everybody has their darlings and their projects that they love, and it's like it's not generating anything. It's a cost center. We call it a cost center because no revenue and it just costs.
Yeah.
Being originally being an accountant, those areas jumped out at us right away. We're like, what are you doing over here? It's like that's not bringing in any revenue, but the CEO really loves this project. There's, you know what, there's a lot of things that I love that are absolutely useless and aren't making my life any better. So I should probably cut those out. And the same thing with that. And again, those conversations can be difficult if you don't want to upset the CEO because you're afraid they may lose your job. In a fractional situation, yeah, they could still show you the door, but uh, you level set that up front. Say, look, I'm going to be upfront and I'm going to tell you things you may not want to hear, but my goal here is to provide you the best marketing guidance I can to take this organization where you want to take it. So that means you're going to have to hear things that you may not want to hear. You may say this campaign is not going to do anything for us because of the market, what's going on in the world. It's not a strength. I saw this growing up in Detroit. General Motors. I love picking on them because my family worked for them for a long time. I somehow missed it, but generations before me did. And I saw it, time and time again. Like, they would get involved in things that were just completely different from cars. When they were buying satellite dishes and all this other thing, they were getting in banking and finance. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? You make cars. Be real good at that. Then if you want to, spin off and have other divisions that do different things, okay. But they weren't at that time, they weren't making good cars and they weren't making good, satellite systems, and they certainly weren't doing anything good with banks, so they were running themselves into the ground. It's like I understand diversification of revenue is a good thing. At least they tell you that in entrepreneur school, but if you're not any good at it, maybe you should not throw so many eggs in that basket. I know eggs is probably a sore subject right now because they're really expensive at the time of this recording, but yeah, $12 for a dozen of eggs is like, Yeah, I might want to change my breakfast diet a little bit. Being breakfast leadership, that's it's kind of maybe I need to change my need to change my logo into something besides an egg. I might be triggering people just if they see the logo. I don't know. Maybe I'll put a piece of bacon or something in there. I'll think about. I'll talk with my branding people and see, and they'll say, you know what, that's been your logo since time. You don't, that's like Coca-Cola changing their formula just on a whim. It's like maybe rethink this, but. And that's a good segue into, some stories that you've seen as far as challenges that maybe some clients have had or even people that you've mentored have had. Because marketing, especially in a CMO, that is a leadership role. It's not just, okay, we're going to do the campaigns and, get all the presentations together and the artwork and all of that. No, that's a leadership role. You're taking initiatives on that. So, what are some of the stories you'd love to share?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned something really important with General Motors, and there was a lot going on. And I think that as the founder of a brand, like your job or the CEO of a brand, your job is to be that ideas person. But when you bring in the fractional support, their goal is to say, okay, stripping everything away, all of your ideas, what is the goal that you have for your brand? I work a lot with startups. So are you planning an exit? Are you planning to raise another round? If you are going, for the long-term growth route, what do you have profitability measures? Like, what are you working towards? Then my job is to create a plan to make that goal happen. And then, like you said, Michael, bring everyone on the team in on that goal, train them in the marketing strategy, and make sure that when the fractional engagement ends, your team is set up to carry the goal to fruition. So a lot of what I do is coming in, training and leading the teams, and there's leadership is the theme of this show. So a lot of that involves leading these teams in a different sort of way, right? I'm coming in, but I'm not going to be their leader forever. And so I need to equip them with the skills to carry on the mission when the engagement ends. In one particular case, I joined an organization as their fractional head of growth, and they had one marketing teammate at the time. I was building up the team, training everyone, and then I was planning. It was a 1 year engagement. So after that, they were going to resume leadership under the chief operating officer. So as part of this, the existing marketing team member was really disengaged. And so separately, I needed to find out what was happening. Why was work quality dropping steadily over time prior to me coming on? And did we need to part ways with this team member who had been there a long time and knew the organization very intimately and did great work before the product declined, their work delivery declined? And if not, how can we save that relationship? And what I found out is that due to a really bad mismanagement, and everybody's had a bad manager, so just picture that manager. That was this person's manager. Due to that, there was a lot of trust issues with this particular teammate. And so I needed to build up trust with this teammate and build up confidence. So a lot of what this teammate was doing is there were so many projects on her plate that she was extremely overworked. And so her work quality was dropping. She was feeling disengaged because she wasn't passionate about the work that she was creating any longer. And so it was like a self-deprecating cycle. It was a flywheel, but in the wrong direction. And so what I did is I upped my FaceTime with her. We met a lot more regularly. I personally managed her workload, which is something that I don't normally do as part of fractional engagements. We set priorities, and then the team member works to ladder up to those priorities. But to keep her plate clear and build that trust, we did a lot of project management. And over time, she was able to get to a place now where she was asking to take on more work. So previously, she was in charge of like one or two projects, but we were able to streamline, make her work more efficient, and she was able to grow in her roles and responsibility. So not only was she actually able to produce more work, but she was feeling so much better about her work, and the work quality improved as well.
You save that individual's career, not only just with that organization, but probably for the next however long they'll be working just by doing that work. And one, showing that you care. I think that was a big thing that you actually cared to take the time and figure out, okay, why is this high performing person all of a sudden, shrinking down to barely doing anything? And now, they went to asking for more work because they learned how to maximize their own efficiencies to get more done in less time. And a lot of people that struggle with getting things done, when we tell them, you can accomplish more by doing less, it really messes with their brain. Their brain can't wrap their head around that because they're currently drowning. They feel they just are overwhelmed. They have too much to do. And in many cases, it's like, well, it's how you do it. It's when you're doing it. It's like do you have everything together? Do you have all the pieces? Do you have to go through silos to get all the things you need? Is everything available in one spot, or do you have to go to 15 different buildings to get all the parts to build something? There's countless stories. I know you've seen a ton of them. I've seen a ton of them too. It's like, why is this over here? Why don't you put all these things together here? Because you use all these parts here. Why are they in different spots? So like, you just stream, and I do that myself all the time. I look and go, okay, what do I have on my plate this week? All right, what can I move around? What can I group together that allows me to, accomplish everything I want to do, and use whatever quadrant of the brain that I need to use for that particular type of work. And if I can group similar tasks together that use that, then I'm not bouncing back and forth, which causes your brain a little issues because it takes time to recalibrate. Some people more than others, but I find, and again, it's understanding yourself. And I think in many cases, and I know you've seen this too, especially in organizations you're going into, one, they don't really know what they want to do from a marketing standpoint, but secondly, they don't really truly know what they want to do, just in general. And a lot of people go, "Wow, this is a mess." I look at that as there's a lot of opportunities here. In the case of the person that you helped, organization easily could have said, "You know what, Angela, yeah, we're bringing you in. We're going to let that person go because they're just not cutting it, and don't invest any time with them. Move them on." And then you would have gone in, got everything cleaned up, and handed it off to whomever, a year later, and organization would have been fine. But because the organization and you and that individual were all open to figuring all of this out, like I said, you saved that person's career and you've actually improved the organization as well. It speaks volumes to, what you do besides, the helping an organization out with their marketing ideas and initiatives. So, make sure you celebrate that because that's a big deal. Not a lot of people do that. The former accountant could make an off-colored remark around marketing people, but I'm a former accountant. I don't make fun of market. I do not make fun of marketing people anymore. I embrace them. I thank them. I apologize for the jokes that I made back in accounting school because I was naive and dumb. Now I'm just dumb. And it's like you don't do that because without marketing you don't have anything to count. So it's important work. So that and one of the things that it jumped out at me too when you're talking about this when you go into organizations is marketing, like many other things, it's like, okay, that's an activity, but the successful companies, they make it part of their DNA. It's an ecosystem, and I know you've commented that on that before in the work that you do, but it's truly, designing this living, breathing ecosystem that we put a marketing label on it, but there's more to it than that, and we've already talked about a little bit about that, but let's dive in a little bit more with the time we have left on what a good marketing ecosystem looks like from your observation.
Yes. So I love the concept of the marketing ecosystem because it's really focusing your effort in the right places, right? So we just talked about this employee who was disengaged at work. That was a byproduct of how the organization was operating. But when it comes to marketing, we don't want our marketing to be a byproduct. We want everything we do to be very intentional. And so that's why the marketing ecosystem is really like the secret sauce for brands to be successful. So nobody wants a marketer to come in and just blow marketing dollars, right, Michael? You mentioned that's where some of the bad rap with marketing comes from. So when we use an ecosystem perspective, we strip back the amount of places that we're showing up. We're focusing on the places that are bringing in business, and then we're doing those really well. So, for example, if you are scaling your brand to seven figures, then you would want to have like one marketing channel that brings in business for you. After seven figures, you should have, maybe one or two. And you can see as your brand grows, you start bringing in like one or two more brands at each revenue mile, or not brands, marketing channels at each revenue milestone. And so when you do it this way, your marketing is no longer a byproduct. It's something that you're intentionally doing, and you have the resources to build out the infrastructure to support that channel. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm going to start running ads, and all of a sudden I'm going to have so much business, and it's great. But you need to focus on making the ads work well for you. And then what happens when they come to your website? Are you making sure that you have optimize that for conversions? What happens after they join your email list? Do you have the welcome sequence set up and optimized? At each stage in your marketing ecosystem, there are so many places that you need to be focusing to make sure that your marketing is getting returns. And so when you're focusing on each area and giving every place the attention that it needs to be successful for your business, you no longer have a byproduct of your actions. You're acting intentionally, and the returns are there, and you will be rewarded for it.
I think that's what's really important is understanding that all the touch points, no matter where people stumble across you or find you, is, what is your intent for people when they find you? What would you like them to do? And it's, mapping it out. And for startups, they're like, I want them to buy something. Okay, all
Yeah.
right, duh, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Otherwise, you're like, why are you doing this? If you don't want to sell anything, what are you doing? It's like if you're, just doing it for fun and games. Oh, nothing wrong with that. Okay, good. But usually, it's you want to entice people to part with their hard-earned revenue and invest it in something that you're offering that will help them be better or do something better than they were before. And, getting that, you know, really clear. And I think, a phrase that Kerry Oberbrunner, he ran a publishing house that published a couple of my books. He loved to say, clarity attracts and confusion repels. And when people are confused about, okay, what do you do? Then they're not necessarily going to go, all right, here, have some of my money. If they're clear on what you offer, doesn't mean they're going to buy from you. They may not be your ideal customer, but at least they're going to have an idea of what you do. And I think that's something that is not a set it and forget it. It's something you have to touch base and check with yourself and your team frequently. Who are we? I remember that conversation many years ago with a nonprofit that I was running. One of our board members stood up in a board meeting because the board was coming up with 40 different things that we could do. And he finally just stood up and he said, who are we? What do we do? What is our role here? And he'd ask people, what's the mission and vision and values? And it was on the posters behind them when they were seating, but no one knew what it was because they just were, put together and thrown up on a wall. It wasn't a living, breathing thing for them. It was an exercise of here's our mission, vision, values, hanging on the wall, done. It's not who they were. And I think organizations need to remember who are they, what do they do, and what do they want to accomplish. And you, it's basically like a template in many ways to simplify it. It's when you're doing marketing or any initiative, you have a foundation. And if you have a strong foundation, then you're starting off on the correct foot. And from there, you have a decent opportunity to actually do something, beneficial for the people you serve.
Yeah, 100%. I think that when it comes to creating the strong foundation for your marketing, it can feel a lot like you're taking two steps back to take one step forward. But in reality, what you're doing is you're building the momentum that you need to be successful. And I know a lot of people may have the point of view, well, if it's not broken, why fix it? But what I would say to that is, do you want to hobble along in your business, or do you want to have something that actually feels great to run, is streamlined, and gets you great returns? Because I'd much rather have that in my business than feeling constantly overwhelmed and that I don't have enough resources to invest in all of the million things that we're doing.
Hmm.
I'd rather have something that is actually generating the returns that I want to see.
Yeah, reminder, and I share this stat all the time. When people say, "Well, if it's not broke, don't fix it." 52% of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000, so 25 years ago, 52% of those companies are gone. They don't exist anymore. Over half of the Fortune 500 companies from 25 years ago no longer exist. So, you know why? Because they said, it's not broke, let's not fix it. And there were other things too, obviously. Market conditions, whatever they happen to be making, there's a variety of different things. But it's a stark reminder that you're constantly growing and tweaking this thing. You're either growing or you're, declining. And as organizations, you keep pushing forward because society needs new stuff and we want better products and services. And if you get your marketing system right, you're going to be able to fight through it and be successful and be hopefully one of the 48% that are still here. So that's my wish for everybody. So, Angela, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Yeah, you can keep up with me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/ Angela B. Frank is the URL to find my profile.
Yeah, I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So thanks again for being you and for helping that individual. I know you've helped out more than one person. I know that. But I really appreciate your time today and thanks so much for being on the show.
Michael, this was great. Thank you so much.